Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to our Muse series. This month, we are diving into Thalia, who I absolutely love because I think having a great sense of humor is magical in and of itself. It can help you manifest all sorts of things. You got to keep that sense of humor. I am wearing today one of my priestess necklaces that I wear when I do service to the muses. The reason I decided to bring it out, I know I'm not doing service right now, but I wanted to show it to you because in one of my last EDU recordings, I did talk about, I think it was our Sacred Sexuality series. I talked about Tungusic shamanism, ritual psychology, and the Lesser Pentacle ritual. And I did talk about having special items, special pieces of jewelry that you use only for certain rituals or certain workings. And so I thought today I would show you one of those special items that I wear when I'm working at the muses. Just kind of an example. The other thing I wanted to point out before I jump into the PowerPoint is that this is not a closed practice. You know, I hear a lot of that today online, and I think, what does that mean? No spiritual practice is closed. I don't really know where that came from. You don't have to be a Hellenic pagan or, Hellenic at all. You don't have to practice Hellenism. If you feel called to work with the Greek Roman pantheon, then work with them. That's your calling. This is open to anyone who wants that extra inspiration. You know, the muses are wonderful for inspiration, glamour, attraction, influence, and persuasion. There's so many things that the muses bring to the table. You know, creativity, I mean, is a huge one, especially if you're an artist, a writer, a creator of some sort, a craftisan, whatever they call them these days, an Edison, what is it, Etsyison? I don't know how you say that. But anyway, the point is the muses are wonderful. And today with Thalia, she does have attachments to palmistry and threshold magic. I'm going to jump a little bit more deeply into threshold magic because palmistry is such a huge topic. I literally could spend the whole day trying to explain the ins and outs. So I'm going to give you kind of a brief taste of that, but we'll really kind of focus on threshold magic today. Anyways, that's my little pre-recording rant here. Let's jump into the PowerPoint. All right, folks. You know, this always takes me a second. Hang on. And here we go. Wonderful. Okay, Thalia, the muse of comedy. Having a good sense of humor, honestly, I don't know how you survive in today's day and age without one. You really, really need one to make it nowadays. So let's talk about Thalia. You know what else I love about this muse? I can pronounce her name without having to practice it beforehand with the Google pronunciation app. So I love that about her. All right, so Thalia is attached to comedy, nature poetry. When we're working with Thalia, we are working manifestation magic, which really kind of fits with all the muses. But Thalia is interesting because she really is attached to the law of attraction. I'm sure you've heard that before. The rights with the law of attraction. So when you think of law of attraction, think of Thalia. She is used in theater and sacred plays. So, for example, Madison, my oldest daughter, some of you actually work with her through Grave Intentions. Madison is a performance arts student. She, spent time at UW Whitewater and UW Parkside. She works with a theater guild in Kenosha. So with her practice, because she is not only a performer, she's also a writer. She also is a director. So she is kind of dabbling in all aspects of live performance theater. She actually uses Thalia especially before rehearsals and during opening nights and closing nights. There are different rituals they do with Thalia for, luck and favor during their performances. Performance is sacred, by the way. That's almost an act of magic by itself. So connecting with spirits of the land, in my last presentation, again, I think it was the Sacred Sexuality series, when I was talking about sacred shamanism, I was talking about land spirits a lot. And, Thalia is actually kind of interconnected into that shamanistic approach in magic. She definitely is kind of a go-between, a bridge if you're trying to work with land spirits. Ivy luck. Okay, so using ivy and luck spells is as old as time. You can find that in grimoires from the 12th and 13th centuries. But ivy luck spells for good luck, especially if it is connected to influence, persuasion, public speaking, performance, writing, creating something. She is wonderful to work with in that arena. Laughter. So listen, laughter is magic, you guys. In today's day and age, I find that a lot of the people I work with have lost that part of them, that fun, carefree, that sense of humor. I love sarcastic humor too. I'm sarcastically funny. I love it. But laughter is medicine. It's good for the soul. It's good for the spirit. It is a natural way to cleanse ourselves, to prevent fragmentation. It's almost like a preventative medicine in magic, so that you're not becoming fragmented by day-to-day life. It's a way to raise your vibration. We forget to laugh, and laughing is so important. We can't take anything in this existence too seriously. And what I mean is that, yes, serious things happen, sad things happen, stressful things happen, but we have to stay in touch with that side of ourselves that can laugh and be carefree and find that glimmer of funny, maybe in a gloomy situation, because that's a survival skill, you guys, especially with the way the world is right now. So, laughter. When you're laughing, think of Thalia. Symbols associated with Thalia. So the comedy mask, of course, the crown of ivy and the shepherd's staff definitely are her symbols. Okay, so of course she's one of the nine muses. She is the patron of comedy. She's also part of the Graces, and that is a group of goddesses that oversee fertility. So she kind of has a dual role. If you are doing fertility magic, I would definitely there are definitely some deities I work with in my omnistic wheelhouse that are not Greek or Roman. But if you are in that Greek Roman pantheon, I would incorporate Thalia for sure in fertility work. Um, obviously her themes are humor, also festivities and recreation. So parties, right? Having fun at parties, weddings, birthdays, all these big events. Thalia is a muse to work with, especially if you're planning a wedding. I have that witchy wedding package that I do with people. And I actually incorporate Thalia work into that package because she is kind of the goddess of parties. So some of her symbols also do include party decorations. If you're researching her online, you might see her depicted with different party elements, because that's her wheelhouse. If you're planning a party, you want it to be unique. Thalia is a great muse to reach out to for inspiration there. Especially if you want it to be lighthearted, carefree, fun, like weddings. Weddings are serious events, but they are meant to unite and bond, and we're supposed to have fun, and we're supposed to find joy in those events. And joy comes through laughter. She also is the inspiration behind the Feast of Fools. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit more in the next slide. But this is a celebration where it's very similar to Saturnalia. I do a Saturnalia service every year. It's where roles are reversed. The master becomes the slave becomes the master. I don't like using those words, but that's how it's described. There's this role reversal. And it takes place one day a year to kind of round out the year. It's usually at the end of the year, but it's called Feast of Fools. And I think I wrote a little bit more about that. Oh, yeah, here we go. So during the Middle Ages, around New Year's, it was a mock religious ritual called Feast of Fools. So very, very similar to Saturnalia. So normal roles were often reversed, and reverence kind of went by the wayside. People let down their kind of stuffy, day guards, and it was just all about fun and pleasure, having a good time. So with Thalia, if you're working with her, there's a lot of playful, enthusiastic energy there. One of the amulets I would recommend that you can make very simply on your own is an amethyst, blessing an amethyst to bring joy and luck through working with Thalia, kind of bringing that playful, enthusiastic energy of this muse into that stone, that crystal. I actually gave you an affirmation here that you can use to charge it. Thalia, inspire my humor and muse throughout my life, joy diffuse. Very simple. I think, again, in one of my last recordings, I talked about in ritual psychology, keeping, a simplicity there. We do want to honor sacred syllables, sacred sounds, but keep it simple. Keep it simple. And this is a very simple affirmation that you can do. Now, you can carry this amethyst with you at any time, especially if you feel like you're a little bit more on the serious tone and you want to lighten up a little bit, your sense of humor is waning. This is a great stone to carry around with you. All right, so her name can be interpreted several ways. Some of her interpretations are the luxurious one, she who flourishes, she who brings flowers, luxurious growth. So these are all different pseudonyms for growth and blooming, right? Thalia is there to help us grow and bloom through laughter, through comedy, through that inspiration. Now, she is one of the nine muses, but again, as I said, she's also associated to the three graces. All of them hang out on Mount Helicon. So here's my thing. I have a suspicion, and you find this a lot with the Greco-Roman pantheons, is she's one and the same. I can't prove that through literature, but if you do a deep enough dive on her research wise, it does look like she is the embodiment of both. They're not separate beings, they're not separate entities. And we find that a lot. I think I talked about that in when I was in the sacred sexuality, Buddhist magic, Tibetan tantra, when we talk about the red Tara and the black Tara also being Kali Ma in Hinduism and also being Kali in the Ars Goetia. It's the same being, but she is reflected differently as if she is a different being depending on what text and what century you're reading about her in. So for Thalia, I do believe that holds true here. I believe she is a grace and she is a muse, and it's just the one being. I can't prove it, but so I wanted to share this with you. If you are going to incorporate Thalia into your practice, this is, again, I've done this with some of the other muses, kind of a short, almost like prayer or calling in affirmation. I'm not going to read it out loud, but I have it here on screen for you so that you have it for, your toolbox, your practice box. It is a way to kind of create consistency in petitioning. So if you do decide to work with her, you want to kind of create a consistent monologue, dialogue when you're doing your services. And so I like this one. I think it works very well for her. But I'm not going to read it out loud because I don't want to do service, but this is for you guys for your weapon box when you're working with deity, or weapon box, your toolbox. Oh my goodness. Okay, so again, she is associated with inspiration, creativity, intelligence. And here's the thing with her, I put some questions here to ask yourself. Do you need to be motivated in taking on a new project or completing an existing one? Do you maybe just need to get through your daily routine? Maybe you're struggling there. You can call upon the muses, and not just Molly or Thalia. All the muses really can help you with these types of questions. You do some research, find the muse that fits your needs or your goals, or you can call on all of them. If you're kind of conflicted on which one maybe works best for you, like for me in my practice, I work with all of them, but I'm definitely attached to Urania the most. We have the tightest bond out of the nine muses. But I do work with all of them, and you may feel like you have a tighter bond with one of the muses or two or three of the muses, but you can work with all of them. I gave you a kind of a little bit of a service / spell affirmation that you can use here. I just select 9 small white pillar candles or tea lights, put them on a big mirror. Okay. Set them in a circle on that mirror. And as you're lighting them, speak each muse's name. And then there is a charm you can repeat. It's an affirmation, but I call them charms sometimes. Muses 9, Sisters of Divine Creativity, I humbly call on you, asking you to share your gifts. May these symbolic flames ignite my inspiration. With gratitude and reverence, I make this request. And then you would extinguish the candles and give thanks. You don't have to give an offering if you don't feel called to do that. But if you do feel called to do that, maybe leave them an offering. Maybe it's a piece of art you created. Or something that you've seen at a yard sale that said, "Oh, I'm sparkly. The muses would love me." But this is just kind of like an introduction to working with the muses, like maybe to help you figure out which one might come forward for you. You know, one of them might hear your call and be like, "I want to work with you," and then you might want to investigate that relationship. All right, so Thalia, like I said, she is associated to palmistry. Okay, I gotta take a drink here, guys. Here we go. There is so much involved in palmistry. I am going to give you a brief once over, and then we're going to jump into threshold magic, where I'm going to put a lot of focus today. Excuse me. So, first of all, I learned palmistry years and years ago. Um, and I have worked with a gentleman at a company called the Divine Hand. He has his own business. He is a professional palmist. And I have worked with Deborah Voigt out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Deborah has some wonderful books on the market. I think she self-publishes now through Amazon. She actually has me in one of the acknowledgement sections of her books, which I was so flattered. She's amazing. I was very flattered. But I learned a lot about palmistry from those two individuals. Now, palmistry is fatalistic. It is somewhat myth-based. I want to give you some historical um, background here. As with all the deities we work with, as with all of our practices, there is mythology there, and it's important to know the mythology. So in palmistry, these are not predictions. What your palms are showing you are patterns. Now, this roots in India. This was an ancient practice, very Vedic in nature. Now, the Romani or Romani people, depending on how you pronounce it, I have Romani blood from my grandfather Sosha's side. But with the Romani people, they picked this up. They started spreading it throughout their people, Eastern Europe. So it kind of dropped that Hinduism aspect, but it kept the superstitions and traditions that came along with those ancient practices, those Vedic practices. So originally in India and in Eastern Europe, this palmistry was done after a reading, after a divination by a priest, and it was a remedy. So they would look at your palm after a reading and give you a remedy. And it was attached to astrology. So a lot of times it was creating an astrological talisman or doing a service during a very specific astrological period to fix whatever your problem was. So that is originally what palmistry was used for. So it flourished between the years of 1400 and 1600. So the Renaissance period was huge for palmistry. Then in the 1600s, the Catholic Church comes in. They say, no, 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 that's evil, because it was a competitor. They didn't want the priests getting paid for readings and palmistries. They wanted their priests getting paid. So they, banned it amongst their people and started to do a smear campaign on it being, whatever, to get people to turn away from that. Then we seen a revival in the 1800s. And when it revived in the 1800s, it brought along some science. So it became, there was a scientific kind of injection into it, which I love. I like to fuse the two, science and magic. They're the same thing, honestly. Now, today, in the 2025s, the revival has a psychological approach. So there's a lot of psychology involved on top of the science and on top of the ancient Vedic traditions. So we've seen it really kind of expand since the 1400s, obviously. So I have this little diagram here. This is your love luck based on your palm line. So how lucky are you in love? And this kind of just gives you a diagram, of what those luck indicators are. So anyway, moving on. Finger meanings. And like I said, I wanted to put this in bite-sized tablets for you guys today because there's so much information here. There's so much involved. So you see my diagram here in the lower right-hand corner, indicating which finger is associated with which planet. So starting with your Jupiter finger, that is your love and fortune finger. It is your finger of power. It's your pointing finger, your index finger. It is your beckoning finger when you're telling somebody, come here. It's also your finger of authority and direction, like when you're pointing, right? Then you have your pinky. So I will tell you the interesting thing about your pinky is if you ever notice if you're with somebody, if the pinky is out, that usually is a subliminal, subconscious indication that they want to talk to you, right? So always look for that, is that pinky out a little bit? But pinkies are associated with Mercury, communication, expression. Then you have Saturn, your middle finger, right? Your flip off finger. This finger is, associated to law, limits, rules, ethics, rule violations. Then you have your thumb. Your thumbs really, your thumb represents Venus and Mars. You have, and it breaks down, and I don't want to dive too deeply into this, but when you think of thumbs, think of Venus and Mars, Aphrodite and Aries, love and war, fucking and fighting. Okay. They're the polar opposites that are interconnected, right? It's all about, thumbs are about action, about will, motivation, about doing. And then you have the sun finger, right? That's your ring finger. It's your identity, your image, your self-esteem, and your self-projections. So that's just a breakdown of what the fingers independently mean. Now, one of the things I read now, when I'm talking to somebody, I can't say, give me your hand, I want to look at your lines. I will watch how they use their hands to communicate with me, right? And the way that they communicate with their hands can tell a lot. So let me see if I can move my frame here. Yeah, that's better. So I have some diagrams on here showing you different hand posings with the fingers. Are the fingers extended? Are they flexed? Are they abducted? Are they adducted? Separated or together, right? So these are very telling. So you don't have to grab somebody's hand and start reading the lines to read somebody. So the hand, it is used to take action, especially those thumbs, remember? Now, when we're looking at fingers and how they're being presented to us in expression, if they are extended, this person's very awake, active, they're expressive, they're extrospection. I don't know if that's the word I wanted to use. They're extroverts. If they are flexed, that means they're not really the directing type, right? They're also not very worried about rules. They are receptive. They're a little bit more passive, so they're a little bit more inactive. They're more introspective, right? Versus extrospective. I guess that's why I use that word. I just figured it out. Anyway, are the fingers abducted? Okay, so abducted, they're separated there. See, there's like that independent energy. They're a very independent person. Their energy is very independent. Are they adducted? Are they together when they're talking to you? Do you notice like, okay, their thumbs are together, like maybe they're, flexed a little bit. This is somebody who is very collaborative. This is somebody who keeps the shit together. So, like, if I was looking to put somebody in charge of something, I probably would want an adducted hand because they are going to keep the shit together and they are going to collaborate. And whereas somebody who is abducted with that separation, they're a loner and they kind of want to do things their way on their own. Now, your right hand is you in public. It's your external life. Whereas your left hand is your private life. That's your internal life. And it's the life you share with the people closest to you, spouses, children, parents. When I was learning palmistry many, many, many years ago, I mean, we're talking 30 some years ago. How old am I? Yeah, about 30 years ago. I was always taught at that time that your left hand was your passive and your right hand your active, but that your left hand held your past lives, your past actions, your past karma, whereas your right hand was the hand of yet to come. So your north node hand is your right hand. This is what you're working towards in this life. So a lot of people do have some variations on how they view the right hand and left hand, but this makes the most sense in explaining it to you today. Think of your right hand is your face to the world and your left hand is your face to yourself and those that you trust fully. All right, there we go. All right, chakras. Now your chakras are in your fingers. Let me move my video box again. I'm always moving this damn box. Um, Come on, box. Ugh, why doesn't it want to cooperate? I'm so sorry, you guys. There we go. That's good enough. All right, chakras in your fingers. The reason I wanted to introduce this as part of palmistry to you today is because if you injure a finger, if you cut a finger, you break a finger, it's important to know what that finger means on a chakra level. And let me explain this to you. I have experienced this personally, and I have seen this with many, many clients over the years, the last couple of decades, where a finger injury actually tells me what's going on with that person or myself. So, example, several years back, I was frustrated. I was in my daughter Delaney's bedroom. I was trying to move furniture very, very quickly to organize because I had cleaners coming to the house. And I was in a bad mood and I was arguing with her as I'm picking up this couch and I'm just tugging it, right? Well, I ended up falling backwards. There was a closet behind me and the door was cracked open. Well, as I'm falling, my natural instinct is grab whatever's behind me to stop the fall. Well, I grabbed the door with this hand, my left hand, my passive hand. And then I slammed into the door. Well, I was holding on to the door, slammed my thumb, slammed the door shut on my thumb, and I lost my entire thumbnail and fractured the tip of my thumb bone where there was almost complete separation. And I will tell you, when they are trying to stitch a thumb, the nerve endings in there are funky and like they could not numb me. And I had to feel the whole thing. It was absolutely tragic, but I healed up. You know, you would never know I had such a serious fractured injury of my thumb and that I had to have a new thumbnail and everything grow in. It actually healed up perfectly. Like I even got a nail back because neat trick in the ER, they took tin foil and they tucked it into my nail bed to keep a gap there for a nail to regrow. So, anyways, I'm sharing that story because what chakra is the thumb and the area of the thumb, connected to? So it was a top thumb injury. So you are looking at the crown chakra and the third eye chakra, connection to the divine and intuition and foresight. And I shit you not, after I got this injury in the 2 to 3 months that followed, I started having very divinatory dreams that actually led me to a new compound that I use that's very popular today. So there was this big kind of event about to occur for me, and that injury actually was um in a weird way kind of like letting me know, get ready, there's like going to be this huge divine intuitive thing happening. So anyway, I'm sharing that story because I've dealt with lots of people who have had hand injuries, and the fingers do tell a lot about what's going on with your chakra system. Are you having knuckle issues? That's usually throat chakra, self-expression, communication. Are you going through some relationship issues with family, friends, partnerships? That's that green area. It's between that first and second, knuckle there. And that's self-acceptance, it's relationships, it's love. Did you cut yourself there? A lot of people get paper cuts or weird cuts on their hands or weird bruises or even like hard spots on their hands. A lot of people get those kind of hard callousy spots on their root chakra indicator points on their fingers, right there at the base of the finger as it comes into the palm. Well, those are your basic needs. That's grounding, that's belonging. Have you ever had like one of those hard kind of tough spots that just went away on their own for some reason? Well, you probably cleared up that chakra that was, kind of polluted. So I think this in palmistry is probably, I think one of the most important aspects to know is the chakra layout in the hands, in the fingers, so that when you receive an injury there, what is going on? Which part of your energetic system needs attention? All right, I spent a lot of time on that. I apologize, you guys. Okay, moving on. Let me get a drink here. All right, so of course I wanted to bring in the tarot, right? Because in tarot cards, you will notice almost all these figures are making hand gestures or gestures with their fingers or they're holding items. Well, that is related to palmistry. That is related to that ancient Vedic, process of remedies. So I'm using the Hierophant as an example today, but you could literally look at every single major in the tarot and find palmistry aspects in them. So with the Hierophant, we see her look at her hand. She has it up. She's in teacher pose because we call that teacher pose. Two fingers together, it's like a blessing pose. It is Saturn and the sun, and they are close together. That is identity and ethics being linked together. That is integrity. This is the trademark of a fundamentalist, right? She has a flexed ring finger. That is looking within. That is introspection. That is somebody with humility who's sort of carefree, but they still have that slight teacher pose. So that integrity elevates them. So if I was reading the Hierophant, if somebody came up to me and they were doing that with their hand, they were doing the teacher pose, blessing pose, however you want to call it, that's exactly how I would read them. I would never have to look at their hand. I would just look at their hand expression. But this isn't every single tarot card. Every single tarot card has these aspects in it. This just happens to be the Hierophants. But teacher pose, blessing pose, Saturn and the sun, identity and ethics are linked. This is a person with integrity. This is a fundamentalist at the core. They look within, they have introspection, and that's where they find their humility, which makes them carefree. I would want to work with this person and learn from this person. They are obviously quite wise. Down here, I have a couple of other little diagrams. A lot of people ask me about aging. This is kind of like a little aging diagram. When you're looking at the lines on your hand, lifeline, heartline, health line, depending on where things are happening on that line, that is an indicator of an age range that event would be happening in. So that's another big thing. But again, you guys, that's like a day-long presentation. So I gave you a little diagram here, but I'm not going to jump too heavily into that. All right, this is Pope Leo, right? All right, what kind of hands does he have? If I was watching Pope Leo, I would say, look at those water hands. He has, in every single photo I've seen of him, video I've seen of him, water hands, water hands. So let's talk about what that means, because this is something a tool that you can use, again, without having to look at somebody's hand or say, let me see your palm, right? Here are the four basic hand types. You have earth, air, fire, and water. Our Pope Leo is water. Now, you'll notice with water hands, they are sort of curved. They are very emotional people. Emotions lead them. Now, you will look at the fire hand. Fire hands they're shorter, and this is very rapid transformative energy that is in this person's core. Look at air hands. Air hands are very straight. These are very logical people, very smart, very logical. And then if you look at earth hands, these are very stable people. Those are going to be longer hands, but these are the most stable people there are. I like to link earth hands to Taurus, but depending on their, aspects, obviously that might not apply. Now, when you're looking at somebody's hand, you're going to notice that right away. Are they an emotional person, a logical person? Are they stable? Are they kind of a rapid fire, transformative, maybe volatile person? Are their hands short, long, straight, curved? How are they presenting those hands? Curved, straight, long, short. These are the things you're looking at without even having to take their hand. So it's kind of a little diagram I gave you here. When you're looking at lines on a hand, and boy, I didn't want to dive into this because, again, that's like, we could sit here for days. The deeper the lines are that you're evaluating on the palm, the more that aspect or energy is awake or is going to impact that person. The lighter the lines or the lighter the crossover symbols, which I'll get into very briefly, the weaker that energy will affect that person. So even if I have, say, a blockage point on my heart line at my 30-year-old marker, if it's a really light line that I can't even see unless I fold my hand or unless I do a handprint with ink, I don't think that's going to affect me too deeply. It might just be a blip. Whereas if it's very deep and pronounced and you can just see it, that's going to affect me profoundly. So just something to keep into consideration if you're looking at lines on your hand or somebody else's hand. Obviously, the three main lines, heart, head, and life, right? The heart line is your emotional temperament and expression, your relationships. Your headline is your thought processing, your ability to keep jobs, be creative, have your own business. Lifeline, it's your life purpose, right? It's also, to a certain extent, your health and longevity, honestly. There's nothing bad. People make a lot of money off scaring people with shit, and it really irritates me. There are nothing, if somebody's looking at your hands and, oh my God, there's a murder and a death and holy shittery over here, I get pissed off because that's not how it works. There's nothing bad there. These are just patterns, divine patterns for awareness. If you see there's a problem area, you can address it and resolve it. You're not karmically tied into some event. Now, some people will argue with me with that, but if you watch the lines on your hands, do a handprint once a year for the next couple of years. I know that's kind of whatever. Your lines do change. The lines on your hands change. They get shorter, they get longer, new lines pop up. Our karma is always changing, and that's dependent on our actions today. So what we do today may create a new line on our hand a year from now. So just keep that in mind. Now, and when you're talking to people, like if you're really into palmistry, it's same thing with divination in general, whether it's tarot, cartomancy, dice. Assume everything you're saying to the person is believed. So you always want to be careful. Make sure you know what you're talking about. Don't do a lot of guesswork. If you are doing projective guesswork, tell them that, like just be careful, be mindful. I have people come to me sometimes and some other reader has horrified them and told them some horrible thing. And my thing is, listen, no matter what's in there, these things can be addressed, they can be altered, they can be shifted. So, yeah, once in a while there are karmic events, don't get me wrong, but most karma has workarounds. Okay. All right. So moving forward, if you are working with somebody and you are doing poem reading and maybe it's just for fun at a party or something, um, a couple of FYIs, ask them to hold their hands up. What do you notice first about their hand gesture? Remember, what kind of hand do they have? Air, earth, are they abducted, adducted? Look at the major lines, the heart line. If they're compassionate, that's going to be a curvy line. If they're a pragmatic person, it's going to be straight. Look at their headline. Are they an emotional thinker? The headline's going to connect, right? Or are they kind of like a rational thinker, like grounded in logic? There's going to be disconnection in that line. Are they very decisive? It'll be a short line. Are they investigative? Do they need to research things? It'll be a longer line. Look at the lifeline. Are they completing lessons in this life? It's going to be long. Are they creating lessons in other people's lives or for their next life? It might be shorter. The fate line, synchronicities, miracles, giving and receiving. When somebody is experiencing a lot of synchronicities, I'm going to see separation points. If they're receiving a lot of miracles in this life, especially if they're casting spells and they're manifesting, I'm going to see a lot of connection in that line. If they are giving, that line's going to be more protruded. If they are receiving, it's going to be more entering into the palm. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. These are just kind of a few FYIs. And then I always like to pause because palmistry usually is done in person. It's very difficult. Besides the gentleman with the divine hand who does it on Zoom, I used to have people do handprints for me if I wasn't going to be able to touch their hand or look at their hand. I would have them do an ink print. But one thing I would always like to do is pause. I don't want to just keep rambling and rambling. I want to pause and ask if what I'm telling that person has meaning or if they need me to clarify things. So if you're doing this for fun, keep these things in mind. There's nothing negative or bad in the palm. These are just aspects that are aligned or misaligned, dependent on our will and our decision making. It reveals patterns, not predictions. Life and fate line interactions play out every minute, day, year, and lifetime. They change. These lines change. You don't believe me? Google it. Start doing your own prints. assume that person that you're giving information to believes every single word coming out of your mouth. So make sure you know what you're talking about. It's my biggest thing. Even unconsciously, your words are going to embed in that person. So always be as positive as possible while still being truthful about the things that they need to be aware of and things that they maybe need to avoid doing. And then allow them to also apply meaning. So like when I'm doing divinations or readings, I'm doing it from a third party neutral perspective, but we're all human beings. Sometimes I may interpret something a little bit differently than how that person might see it. Like they may not have given me certain information. And then once I give them my reading, they say, well, wait, this, and this is going on. And I'll be like, oh shit, I didn't know that. You're right. That's probably what it means. So scratch what I said. That's definitely what it means. So let the person you're working with also project their meaning. If they're way off base, if they're just kind of, looking to grab at whatever they can, be honest, like, hey, you're grabbing here, that doesn't make sense. But always let them do their projections. Palm reading is not mind reading. You are reading static details in presentation, right? So keep that in mind and have fun with it. With divination in general, I enjoy it because it is fun for me, right? And it's fun to be able to help people that way. So one of the biggest things, I don't do palmistry anymore. I mean, I do for friends and family, or if somebody really wants me to do it, I'll do it. But I used to do it at events years and years ago. And I will tell you the biggest question I always got was marriage. Am I getting married? When am I getting married? How many times will I be married? Am I going to have children? How many children? Are they going to be girls or boys? I mean, it was like rinse and repeat, right? Because it is such a big part of our lives. But I put little diagrams here. You can look at your own hand. And there's a lot of great I don't always recommend Google, but there are some really good resources on Google in terms of palmistry. Now there are different flavors, Vedic and astrological focus, palmistry is going to have some differences, but I mean, there's a lot of similarity too. But this is marriage lines down the side of your hand. It kind of gives you an idea of age, how many marriages you're going to have. And it's pretty accurate. I have 3 marriage lines and I am divorced twice. And I do plan on getting married one more time. And that last marriage line comes way up into, my pinky embedded area here. So that's like around 50 years of age. So maybe I'll be getting married in a few years, you guys. Girl children, boy children, also very accurate right here. I have 2 distinct girl marks. I have 2 daughters. There's kind of like this very light masculine mark there. So I wonder if I wasn't supposed to have a son as well. And for whatever reason, whatever decisions I made, I maybe shorted myself out of that experience. And, he maybe went on to wait another, round or something. I don't know. But anyway, take a look at your hands. It's interesting. The other thing I usually got asked were, a lot of us have these weird shapes on our hands. They're crosses, squares, these little islands and circles and tridents and stars and all these different things. And they do have meaning. Again, I don't want to jump too deeply into this because we could go all day here, but some of the basic meanings is if you're seeing squares around something, you're protected in that area. You have protection. If you're seeing crosses, there's usually obstacles or problems in that area. If you're seeing a lot of islands, it could be a period of where you're just kind of struggling. Maybe you're having a hard time grounding. Tridents are usually huge success markers, especially when it comes to work and money or business. Stars are too. Stars are also connected to psychic ability and, karmic path work in this life. And that's a whole, I could go on hours for that. But, a lot of wavy lines means you're going to be on some roller coasters. You're going to have ups and downs in that area. If you see a lot of broken lines in certain areas, that could be lots of different opportunities presenting themselves to you. And again, at the end of the day, those lines are going to change dependent on which opportunities you seize and which you let go of. So, anyway, this is just kind of an FYI, just kind of a funsy little like informational thing. So that's Thalia and her connection to palmistry. So the last part of today's EDU is threshold magic. And I wanted to dive a little bit more deeply into threshold magic. Right here, you see a witch's front door. I don't know if you guys are aware of the purple door myth. It's not really a myth. On certain parts of the country, if you see a purple door, there's a very good chance that whoever lives there is a spiritual practitioner. My last husband refused to allow me to paint our door purple, so I ended up getting a purple crystal doorknob. So I would tell you too, if you approach a home, purple doors, purple doorknobs, both are indicators of a practitioner living there. All right, moving forward. A door is a threshold. It has what's called spirit locus. That is a protection spirit, a spirit of protection for the inhabitants inside. The threshold is a nexus point. This is where spirits are barred and our feet are blessed. And I'm going to get into that. It has a lot of connections to Afro-Cuban practices, very traditional folkloric magic, like in Southern Conjure. It also is connected to ancestral work and animist work. So there's a lot of interconnected belief systems that work threshold magic. It represents the familiar, which is the inhabitants inside the home, versus the unfamiliar or the other, the outside, right? So in spirit work, we deal with this all the time, especially if you're in a spirit communicator. You're constantly standing at a threshold of the familiar versus the unfamiliar, and the door represents that in a very tangible way. And so it's a paradox point, right? It is protective. You can call in or cast out. The door represents chance, chaos, the ability to change those aspects. So it's very important. A lot of people don't think about their doors or their doorways or their windows as having a magical purpose, or if you're a practitioner, these are important things to pay attention to in your home, because you're working in spirit, you're working in frequency shifts and manipulations. You need to make sure that you are dealing with windows and doors and thresholds in your home appropriately. Otherwise, you're calling in and you're not casting out. That could be risky. So, all right. So let's talk about the anatomy of a door. The real fun stuff in today's EDU, you guys. Here's the anatomy of a door. Who knew you needed to know this shit, right? All right, so the lintel, that is the head of the door, the top, the header. That is connected to the firmament, right? That is celestial. It is blessing. It is protection. It is our thought and head processes, our logic. It is our memory, our cognition. And this is where our spirit guides come in, right? If we're calling in. Then let's look at jams. Jams are the stops on the sides, the frame, the side of the door. This is considered in spirit work the bridge, the spirit bridge. It joins two planes of existence together, right? It's an area that joins those two planes. So it also represents stability. These are pillars, right? It's also the left versus right hand. Now, I believe all magic is gray. Any manipulation, I don't care if it's good or bad or otherwise, it is gray. Why? Because it's a manipulation. You're taking energy that you don't like and you are manipulating it into a frequency range where you can change it into something that you desire. So all magic is gray. I don't care if it's to protect someone or to curse someone. However, there are different frequency ranges, high frequency work and low frequency work. So when I say left versus right hand, I guess what I really mean is low frequency versus high frequency. It's your paradox point, right? So then we have the hinges, right? The hinges bear weight. It allows us to open and close that door. It allows for movement. So a lot of time when we're doing threshold work, door magic, the hinges do represent maybe struggle or stagnation or points where we can ease burden that we're experiencing in life. Again, if we go to the animist view, again, I'm going to revert to the last recording, the last EDU I did on sacred sexuality, which was the Tungusic shamanism. We talked a lot about animism. And in shamanism, not just in the Tungusic belief system, but in almost all belief systems, everything has its own spirit. this window has a spirit, that this necklace has a spirit, this clip in my hair has a spirit. And so in that animus view, each element of the door has its own spirit, right? Header spirit, hinge spirit, jam spirit. So I just want to kind of point that out. Now, you don't have to do, just be aware. You don't have to do anything special here. Just be aware there's different spiritual elements. So the handle, the door handle, or the knob, this is your access point. It's all about access. This is a point of decision, choices. You can dress the interior for attraction, so the inside handle. You can dress the outside handle to banish, right? So think of it that way. Then you have the lock or the catch. This holds things in place. It's security, it's protection, it's also binding. If you're doing certain bindings, using locks and keys are not unheard of. I have done that in some of my bindings before I moved over to organ puppetry. I still do, actually, to be honest with you. I just did a custom binding a couple of weeks ago where I used locks and keys. That person had a very unique situation. They had a stalker, and I was trying to get rid of them. So anyway, I also encourage prayers every time you lock a door. Prayers or petitions, however you want to word it. It's basically an affirmation to spirit, to protect your home, protect the inhabitants, seal, this space. It's something that is consistent, that creates a safe space and shielding and warding. And you do that every time you lock your door. You don't always have to do that out loud. You can do it in your head. Right? You don't have to like sit in the hallway if you live in a busy apartment building and talk to your door and have everybody look at you. Say it in your head. It's fine. The faces of a door, right? You have the interior and the exterior. You have the inner world and the other world. So always when I refer to faces of a door, that's what I'm referencing. And then there's the key. The key is probably the most important aspect of threshold magic, in my opinion, because the key is permission. It's license, it's authority, it's access. It is your talismanic link to that door, like a wand, right? When I do astrological talismans, you're creating a link device, right? And you are in authority and control of that device and nobody else. Same thing here. That key is your authority, your power for access, and it links you to that magical paradox point of the threshold. So, all right, moving forward. That's the anatomy of the door. Now let's talk about threshold spirits. Now, I am omnistic. And again, in the beginning, we were talking about a muse who comes from a Hellenistic pantheon. And here I am throwing just about every other pantheon at you. As an omnist, I find truth in all belief structures, and I feel they all interconnect, like a wagon wheel or like a broken mirror that's being pieced back together. I feel everything's connected, and we are not privy to those connections until we go through what we need to go through in this life and we're able to move forward and get those answers. But here are the different spirits that I feel work very well in threshold magic. So starting with Ganesha, most people are familiar with Ganesh. This deity is, very Vedic, very Indian, but, it has spread. It's not just Hinduism anymore. This deity is worked within many, many belief structures. But this deity is for luck, fortune. This deity is a gatekeeper, and it will guard your home. And then, of course, Hecate, Hermes, Cardea, and Janus, all from similar pantheons, right? But these deity are crossroad deity. They are also in charge of doorways and thresholds. They are in charge of, the energies, so to speak, that flow during the turning of the year, during spiritual cleansings or spiritual cleanliness. They have associations too. They are also considered the goddess of the hinges. Now, you may never heard them referred to that before, but in threshold magic, they are called the goddess of the hinges. Then we have Ishu. Ishu is an Orisha, okay? And I'm not going to start this whole bullshit with the closed practice nonsense. Orishas come from all sorts of hodgepodge. This hoodoo is Southern conjure. It is Afro-Caribbean conjure. It is Haitian conjure. It's from all these different sources. As a matter of fact, when it first started getting practiced, the Orishas were practiced in secret under the guise of saints so that their owners would allow them to practice. So somebody may have been making a sacrifice to Uriel, but in reality, it was Ishu. So, anyways, there's so much here. I'm not going to get into that, but Ishu, this is our Orisha. In Orisha worship or Orisha practices like hoodoo. But again, another deity associated with the crossroads, with catalysts, creating catalysts for change, with new possibilities, opportunities for taking chances and risks, very associated to threshold magic. Eligua, okay? Everybody pronounces this a little bit different. Eligua is how I pronounce this. Now, again, I'm not going to involve myself in the war of hoodoo versus voodoo versus voodoo versus Santeria, but this has always been a traditional deity associated to Santeria. This is a warrior deity. If you place the Eligua head near your door, it can be worked for drawing in and barring. So keeping things out, protecting your space, and also drawing in good fortune. So it works both ways. It's almost like an escalator that's working, both sides. And so I really like working with Eligua. I don't work with this deity very often, but I do occasionally. Then we have Exu. Exu is the guardian of the seven doors and the gates. You will find Exu in a lot of Afro-Caribbean, from Haitian to African to Hoodoo to Southern Conjure. There was some powwow Dutch Appalachia associations with Exu for a long time, and then somebody had a tempe tancy and had him removed from that. I get really worked up about that because everybody has access to spirit. Anyway, the point is, Exu is associated with threshold magic, especially in terms of protection and gatekeeping, keeping the nasty out and keeping the good preserved inside. And then you have Exus. Okay, I think I'm pronouncing this right. I might not be. Exus, I don't really work with that often. I am familiar. I have been in ritual that has used Exus. This is very voodoo. Their Exus sometimes is confused with Papa Legba, but Exus is not an Orisha and it's not singular. It is a group of spirits. So it's not, sometimes there's been confusion with it being a shoe or there's a lot of Afro-Brazilian descent here with Exus, but it is a group of spirits that oversee crossroads work. And they are also attached to ancestral work. And I don't like using the word demons or demonic, goetic work. Exus create a bridge to the Goetia. If you're working with the Ars Goetia, to ancestors who maybe had very powerful lower frequencies. So they can definitely protect and shield, but they can also call in more infernal energies if you work with the Goetic. Always be aware that some of these elementals can be tricksters, that there are trickster elements here. So always divinate and meditate before you jump into working with any of these deity. Find the one that you're most compatible with and work with that one or that two. Some of these individuals I'm aware of, I've worked with once or twice, but I don't have a very strong relationship with because I have stronger relationships elsewhere. But I wanted to present all of them because you guys may find you're very connected to Exu or Eligua. So you may want to work with them versus Ganesh or Hecate. So moving on. Whoops. Boy, the sun's coming out, huh? The glare in my apartment is ridiculous today. I was trying to set myself up where I could do this without crazy glare, but I don't know. Anyway, this is, again, I was just talking about the purple door. The purple door for us professional witches, I don't know what you want to call us. It does represent open-mindedness, intuition, awakenings, especially of the subconscious. It does represent our homestead, that we are practicing magic inside. There's a higher level of consciousness in that property, but it's also attached to prosperity, living a prosperous life beyond just money. So this is spiritual prosperity. When we talk about prosperity, a lot of times people think of money and objects, but true prosperity lies in spiritual possession, right? Oh, there's a huge wasp outside my window. Oh my God. Anyway, that wasp is, I love bees. Wasps, they serve no fucking purpose. Anyway, all right. So on the left here, I have an example of a door hanger. So you'll see a lot of these, especially like on Etsy. This is a black tourmaline. I like black tourmaline. It incorporates also, like it says black magic. Really, that's low frequency attachments. The evil eye, negative energies, anything low frequency. Black tourmaline is good. So is black obsidian. Salt, red brick dust by the door, around the door, hanging on the door, to kind of get rid of those energies, neutralize them. You can't really get rid of energy. What you can do is neutralize it. You can convert it. You can change it, you can modify it. So it's kind of like physics, right? We talk about astrophysical science. It's basically taking a, an element that doesn't serve you well and creating fusion and changing it, manipulating it into something that serves you well. So this is just an example of a door hanging you can make yourself with black tourmaline, black obsidian. Boy, am I rambling today? I don't know how long I've been going on. I apologize if I am. Anyway, a charmed door. If you ever have the good fortune of being in my home, I actually have had people in my home. I love charming my doors for lots of reasons. I'm a very visual aesthetic person, but I also like to touch my magical implements. I like to feel them. So charm doors, here are some examples of things that you can use, things I've used that help with threshold magic. So horseshoes, points should always be facing up. It should be over your door. And horseshoes were actually an anti-witch and baddies charm back in the day. So it's kind of funny. They used to use horseshoes to ward off witches, fairies, and vampires back in the medieval times. So, but now, as you know, practicing spirit workers, we know that horseshoes points up over the door will keep out what we call malefics. So if you're doing a lot of spirit work, a lot of spirit communication, if you're using your clairs on a daily basis, this helps keep out transient spirits that may want to attach to you. Hagstones. I didn't put a picture on here. I apologize. If you can get a hagstone and some horsehair and actually wrap that horsehair on some aspect of the stone, or create a horsehair link to the stone, this is beautiful. It makes an amulet if you have pets. It protects your pets. It protects your animals inside your home. And that hagstone with the horsehair can go right up there by the horseshoe, or can actually dangle from the horseshoe. So that is something wonderful if you're a pet owner. And then many of you maybe have heard of, and again, I'm sorry I didn't get a picture, but the Rowan red thread. So it is basically a cross made out of rowan tree wood, and it has dried rowan berries and red thread holding it together. This is a protection device. It's a warding device. It is very old. It's been used in very old grimoires, and I believe it works very, very well. I've used a rowan red thread cross before with the dried rowan berries, and I actually had it above my door, again, in the middle of a horseshoe. So you could have a horseshoe there with your horsehair with a hagstone, and you could put a rowan red thread cross right in the middle. I mean, you could make like as big as you want to go here, but you really only need one or two. Salt, red brick dust, very easy for those of us on a budget, right? The evil eye, everybody's familiar with the evil eye. Don't just buy one at Walmart and be like, throw it on your door. Please, please don't do that. Bless it, cleanse it, bless it, and prepare it to protect, right? Give it direction, infuse it with energy. Otherwise, you're just buying an object made out of ceramic and throwing it on your door for a visual purpose. It serves no other spiritual purpose. Snail shell fetishes. Okay. Snail shell charms, that you can turn into a fetish. I really like these because they're very, very affordable, and they work very, very well, and they're small, so you can hide them if you need to hide them. Basically, you take a snail shell, you're going to fill that shell with, like for me, it would be a rootwork compound for whatever I'm working on. Probably for threshold magic, it's going to be either attracting prosperity in, or barring malefic spirits out. I'm going to fill it with that compound, and I'm going to seal it with clay. I like polymer clay. I actually infuse my polymer clay. You can do that with salt and red brick dust if you wanted to. You can just knead that right in. Now you're going to seal your shell. Now you've made a fetish. You have made a fetish. Now you can put that on the outside of your door for protection, right on the top of the header. There's usually that little landing there. Snail shell charms and fetishes will fit there. So will blackhead bat nut roots. Those will fit up there too for protection, FYI. But you can put it out there for protection, or you can put it on the inside. So the inside header facing in for drawing in. So if it's a prosperity fetish, you're looking to pull in some extra money that month, or you're looking to change jobs, pull that energy in. Shells in general, like I showed you earlier, I have my little shell priestess necklace for the muses that I work with, but shells in general are great for love and fertility. So if you are trying to conceive, if you are in a partnership that you're trying to solidify, or you're looking for partnership, using shells in general are good for that, for drawing in. So you would probably put those on the inside to draw into the home. I like making wreaths. Now, everybody knows I love mugwort and I get picked on all the time. I would use mugwort and everything. I don't give a shit. Listen, rosemary is great. Rosemary helps with memory. And, it also, especially if you do past life work. If you are a spirit worker involved in past life hypnosis work with your clients, please have a wreath of rosemary on the inside of your door. It also will ward harmful spirits. So inside, outside, I think rosemary should be on both. Same with mugwort. Mugwort is protection. It is health, your physical health. It keeps out illnesses. Now, mugwort sometimes goes by the name St. John's wort. They're interchangeable a little bit. I would make a wreath with both. You can use rosemary and mugwort and make a wreath, very simple wreath, put it on the inside, outside. Make two little wreaths, one on each side. Anyway, a little spell, if you're going to use mugwort or rosemary in threshold magic, is to make one of these wreaths on a midsummer night, sorry. You're going to hang that over the door for the entire duration of midsummer. And then you are going to burn that in the next midsummer fire, your next sacred fire, the following year. So you're going to kind of hang that up to absorb some energies from that year, from that midsummer period. You're going to store it probably with some salt, and then you're going to burn it in your sacred fire the following midsummer. It is a very, very old spell, and it is to get rid of stagnation. It is to serve as a door opening. So I like doing that. I am a mugwort person. I throw some rosemary in there, but I make all kinds of shit out of mugwort, seriously. All right. A couple other little tips here. The resurrection plant. Most of you are familiar with this plant. It looks like it's a dead, balled up, whatever, but you put it in water and it comes back to life, right? And then once it dries out, it dies again. And you can keep doing this over and over with a resurrection plant. Resurrection plants are beautiful for lots of spirit applications. When you're doing threshold magic, here's my recommendation. Soak it, bring it to life, take that water and wash the door and the door frame with that water for prosperity. It's a spirit bath, okay? Then what you're going to do is you're going to take 3 to 7 coins. It can be any coins that have meaning to you. Maybe don't just grab loose change at the bottom of your purse. I mean, you can, I guess, but most of us have lucky coins. Take 3 to 7 coins. I want you to put that while the plant is still thriving in, the water, put that on the plant. As the plant dies again, it doesn't really ever die, but as it dries up and seals itself, it is going to seal itself around those 3 to 7 coins. That is now a prosperity talisman. So it's helped you dress your drawer with your door with a spirit bath for prosperity. And now you've created a secondary spell, a prosperity talisman that you can carry with you or keep on your altar. I used to make these and put those in my lamps. So I do a lot of lamp work, the old school, they call them hoodoo lamps, but they're not only used in hoodoo. But when I was doing prosperity lamp work for people, I would actually do that with the resurrection plant with the person's picture. So I'd have their photo and the coins. I would let the plant dry out, reseal itself, and then I would put it into the fuel oil inside of my fuel driven oil lamps. The fuel would not bring the resurrection plant back to life. It would stay in its dried state, sealed. But anyways, just kind of an FYI there. Okay, maintenance for your doors. If you're doing threshold magic on your doors, you can do it on your windows as well. I'll get into that in a second. You do want to do some maintenance. You don't want to just make your wreaths and put up your horseshoes and, just say your affirmation when you lock your door. You want to make sure that you're keeping that energy um, viable. Okay. So once a month, find time to do a spirit bath wash. Again, resurrection plant water is my go-to. Or bless it with oil. You don't have to go buy anything special. You can take extra virgin olive oil, bless it yourself, and use that if you need to. Incenses, incense the door. Any threshold spirits and deity you're working with will love that. And then feed it with magical medicine. If you have an eligua sitting there, make sure you're feeding it. Feed it. Cowrie shells. If you're working with Hecate, feed that deity, because she is protecting and she is guarding the crossroads there for you. Leave offerings. So basic maintenance, I would recommend once a month. Finally, the candle sealing of the door. I love this ritual. I do this ritual at least once a year. I probably should do it more, to be honest with you, but I always find time to do it once a year. I usually do it around Yule, right before, right after Yule. So right before, right after Christmas. Candle sealing goes way, way back. I remember when I was a little kid and my great grandma, or was my great, no, it was my great grandma Bailey. She would actually have all of us kids follow her around when she did candle sealing, and she would make us each take turns dropping the wax bits. So it was like fun when we were kids. Anyway, candle sealing the door. What you're going to do, you're going to get a white candle and you're going to dress it. How do you dress a candle? Roll it in some oils or some blessed extra virgin olive oil. I use mugwort and rosemary. Use whatever you're comfortable or wanting to use. Is it for protection? Is it for prosperity? You're sealing these doors with very certain elements, right? You're going to start at the front door. Use mugwort and rosemary for this, you guys. You use mugwort and rosemary because protection and persevering your health is going to be more important part of the sealing process than prosperity. All right, so white candle, dress it. So oil herbs. Start at your front door. You're going to make a cross or a Kabbalistic cross. Don't Christianize this. I mean, if you're Christian, great. That's part of the pantheon, right? Christianity is part of old pagan, belief systems. But whatever your belief system, there's usually a symbol. Again, my last EDU in sacred sexuality, I went through the Lesser Pentacle ritual and we talked about the Kabbalistic cross and how it connects to Christianity, Judaism, so many different belief structures. Do a cross, Kabbalistic cross, whatever you're familiar with doing, and a prayer to seal things. A prayer is an affirmation. I would state it out loud, sealing your environment. You're sealing it and protecting it, and you're barring any malefics from coming in. You're barring any energy to come in that would harm your health, harm your money. You are keeping things as high frequency as possible. So do your petition to seal, bless and cleanse, right? When I say bless and cleanse, really that's if you're working with deities, threshold deities, you're going to acknowledge them at that time. You may leave them offerings. If you're using resurrection plant water for your spirit baths, maybe you have a spray bottle and you might want to spray the threshold at that time. And then you're going to go to every door and window in your home and repeat this. Now, at each one of these doors and windows, you're going to drop just one drop of wax from that white candle at each sill or threshold. Okay. And this is what my great grandma used to make us kids take turns doing. Now you're going to walk back when you're done to the front door and you are going to drop one last wax drip there at that front door because the front door is the most important, honestly. And then you're going to have a little table or something set up there to let that candle finish burning there. But that is a candle sealing ritual. That is going to protect your home environment. It is going to appease the spirits. It is going to bar the malefics. It is going to attract more prosperity. It is going to keep your health better, your money better, your overall levels of happiness or ability to experience happiness better. So I really recommend doing this. Like I said, I do it once a year. I probably should do it 3 to 4 times a year. I mean, but life gets busy. But I at least do it at Yule. So if you're moving into a new place, definitely do a candle sealing, right? That's a new environment to you. It needs your spiritual attention. So if you're moving into a new apartment, a new home, if you're traveling a lot, hotels really don't like dried wax on the floor and stuff. But if you're going to be in a hotel, if you're a traveler for a couple weeks, couple months, seal up that room if you're going to be in the same room. You can scrape up, that wax right before you leave or whatever. Anyway, let's move on. Sorry, I like to babble. Here we go. That is the end. So, as usual, I hope you guys found this beneficial. I hope you're able to take nuggets from today's presentation and apply it into your own life, into your own practice. I want to thank all of you for your continued support with Patreon. I'm consistently trying to find ways to grow that. I love teaching. I love mentoring, and I want to do more of that. And Patreon is my platform for that. And I'm incorporating YouTube slowly but surely. YouTube is new to me. I think I just started our YouTube a month or two ago. But I'm trying to use these two platforms just to kind of give you guys tools for the toolbox. And so I really truly do thank you for supporting me on Patreon to do that. If you have any questions about this presentation, please don't hesitate to email me. I read all my emails. I may not be able to answer right away, but I will answer eventually. Just give me a hot minute. But, anyways, you guys are wonderful. Take care. Stay magical. It is getting very hot and sunny in this window, so I'm going to shut her on down. Or maybe not. Maybe he wants me to keep talking to you. Nope, we're good. All right, guys. Bye.